Hey everybody, welcome back to the second hour of Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. You're listening to FERlive.com. And if you are just tuning in, we are interviewing two firefighters, veteran firefighters, Captains John, Lord, and Matt. And we've been examining the findings of their many hours of investigation with the Paradise Fires. And if you missed last hour, we're going to archive all this so you can definitely get all the information. But we want to continue on with what's happening with the steel up there. And just to give you a quick recap, what we discovered was massive destruction up there with guardrails that where the wood would be completely burned, and there's nothing to really spark the burning. Like the grass around the guardrails, there's not a lot of fuel up there. And so we're going to continue talking about the guardrails, and then we'll get into some other topics of some ideas of why this happened and some other connecting factors. So without further ado, I want thank you, Captains John and Matt, for being here. And John, I would like you to talk more about what's happening with the steel up there.
Okay. Before it leaves me, though, I wanted to kind of finish up what Matt talked about it in passing already, and that's that we looked at two separate open box trailers, like a dumpster type trailer, probably self-dumping, huh? We looked at two of those separate sites, completely different sites, and both of those trailers were identical in the way that they looked. We could not explain the amount of combustion around the outside of the trailer based on evidence that we were able to see and where they were parked. But these particular dump trailers, 2-axle trailer plus a spare mounted on the side, the rubber is completely gone, like with the cars, rubber's completely gone. And the only evidence you can find that there was a tire on there is the steel belts that were in the radials.
That held the rubber.
Yep.
Wow.
So, I mean, dead on, and we could not explain the destruction of the tires based on the circumstances where they were located and so on and so forth. Okay, so as we're going through this, we're becoming real suspicious about this whole thing with the steel. And so we went into a rather large mobile home park. We didn't even survey the whole park, but all of these mobile homes in this park, as far as we could see, were completely decimated. They're just destroyed. Literally destroyed, gone.
And their footprint. Basically, everything was...
Basically, yeah. Okay, so what was left? Okay. All right, so with newer mobile homes, they call them double wides.
Yes.
Okay, so they build them in two separate halves, and then they haul them down the road, and then when they get them on site, they level them out and attach the two halves together and do a little finish work and whatnot, and it's ready to rock and roll, right? For them to move them down the roadway, the build-up for the subfloor of the mobile home is actually a steel frame. Okay, so this frame in some cases, is only, foot or so off the ground, and we're looking at these frames for it's really about the only thing that's left, Matt.
Yeah.
And we're looking at these frames, and I'm going, Matt, what caused this steel to distort like this? It's all buckled and twisted. And
keeping in mind the heat goes up. These are at the bottom.
so this is the bottom, and it'd be really unlikely that somebody could argue, they probably had a bunch of stuff stacked under there. I don't think I'm buying that.
Okay.
It's each one of these things that we're talking about on its own could be explained as, okay, well, that's an anomaly, but everything else seems normal, but that's weird how that happened. But when you start adding them up, adding each one of these up.
That's why we're trying to lay out the evidence like this.
And subdivision after subdivision after subdivision, the same exact thing. That's where,
So
it paints a picture.
We're in the same mobile home park now, okay? And I want to talk about a couple of steel structures that we surveyed. Okay, the one steel structure was steel frame, steel roofing, carport. Okay,
Yes.
so not terribly long, I don't know what, maybe 10 or 12 feet long, probably 12 feet. And and it was close to the mobile home that was no longer there, that was burned.
Right.
And you could see on the edge of the roofing, where the edge of the roofing had taken some heat, there was evidence of that, and some minor distortion, but just on the edge. And other than that, this whole carport looked brand new.
Wow.
It looked brand new.
Wow.
And that close to a fire, you would expect it to be
And at
melting.
this same mobile home park, the plastic lattice, which looked exactly like that, was fine. Was unburned.
PVC plastic lattice panels. So we're seeing different forms of destruction, and then things like lattice panels that should have been literally melted down. And there's like very little evidence that they were even close to fire.
Wow.
So it appeared that anything that the plastics that were attached to metals, like all the plastics attached to cars, total devastation. But where the plastics were by themselves, garbage cans, lattice, they seemed to fare just fine. Toy structures, plastic toy structures we'd seen, just fine.
Wow, like mailboxes and things too, right? That were plastic. I think we saw some of that. When
Okay.
we were driving through, we saw these mailboxes that weren't touched, but everything else, and garbage cans, like to corroborate that. And then these houses, like they had just demolished on their own footprint,
Yeah.
which is,
And depending on a fire, if you saw a mailbox that survived, they're usually a post and they're sitting by themselves, and that can be explained away. But when you see this stuff where in the absolute exact vicinity where you had total destruction, that's when it makes no sense. Like this mobile home park, there were garbage cans in there that were perfectly fine with vehicles on the road, total devastation, and it just didn't make sense.
Then another interesting point is detached steel buildings. So here's the mobile home, sits right here, double wide mobile home, and in the back of it, a small garden shed, steel garden shed. Here's another mobile home over here, and they decided to copy the Joneses and get an exterior storage container like that. So they're basically exactly the same thing, only one's destroyed and one's not.
wow. I thought that was strange too. When we were driving up, we got into Concow, and we saw all of these like carports that were just metal that were completely fine, but then the cars below them were just demolished. Do you know anything about this? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. We saw cars that had X's on them.
Yes.
Do you know what? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So that's a way of marking whether or not they've been searched and whether or not they found bodies in there or not.
Okay.
That's what I'm assuming it is. I mean, that's
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And
It's usually either an X like this or a 4-quadrant cross like this.
Okay.
And there's a certain quadrant you mark for primary search. Okay, so primary search is look inside and see if you got any victims, but it's not like a detailed search type thing. And then when it does get more of a detailed search, they mark another quadrant.
Oh, so they
And-
put things inside of those quadrants.
Yeah, with a
Numbers.
can of spray paint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
another anomaly is the Bank of the West. When we were there, that mobile home that was set up,
Mhm.
'cause I guess Bank of the West had burned a year earlier, so they had a temporary one of those mobile home
Yeah.
with a generator, one of those trailered generators to
Right.
run it for power. Generator completely burned up, and this is in a parking lot. But the actual Bank of the West mobile home building was completely intact.
did not.
Whoa.
So this was actually, the generator would have been off the grid. Okay, so it was a standalone power source for the temporary bank
Gotcha.
and run off of diesel fuel.
Got it.
And
Got
it was completely demolished, and
Wow.
there's no explanation for it. It's sitting on pavement, there's nothing around it.
by itself. And I guess for me, I would be like, well, is it running on, you said diesel, but it would have to generate some kind of heat, enough heat to spark it, right? To
For
potentially.
that to catch fire, which was all metal, looked like it was all metal, I didn't see, and for the mobile home that it's powering,
That stayed
That's-
fine.
it just seemed odd that that would
Yeah.
have totally burned and the mobile home not.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd like to reinforce what Matt said too, is that these different things that we were finding up there, there's indicators, and some of them were repeated again and again and again. And then there's other anomalies that we found, and that was one of the anomalies, is that generator had somehow gotten fried, and we sure couldn't explain it.
Right. Right.
And are you done talking, do we wanna talk about smart meters yet, or we still wanna talk about, yeah, we'll still talk about smart meters?
Yeah, we could talk about, okay, so we want to wrap this back near the end where we conclude
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
We want to
yeah.
wrap it back to the grounding.
Yes, exactly. We'll
Okay.
do that. We'll do that in some of our conclusions at the end. But so during the Santa Rosa fires, we questioned if smart meters had a role in any of this, and we heard rumors and whatever, and never. It was inconclusive for me, anyways. I'm not sure. I've heard stories. I've seen stuff about smart meters starting fires, and so I figured that might be, a consideration. We went to Pearson Elementary School, and there was a standalone electrical vault service where the electrical service came in for the school in a metal vault, untouched by fire, 360 degrees all the way around. We walked up to it, we opened the door, and in it there's a smart meter that had melted and fallen to the ground.
Wow.
And everything else on the front panel,
V pattern.
yeah, and everything else on the panel, the main shut-off, there was a main shut-off to the school and the main power supply to the school, no other damage. Everything else was fine. So in order for that to burn, it didn't come from an external source. It had to have come through the wiring.
From within.
It had to come from within, whether it pulsed or surged,
surge or a
surge
short.
something through the wiring heated up and melted that. And it was, like I said, there was no external damage to where it was in a container.
Wow. Matt,
So-
could you tell our listeners, or John, explain what is the deal with a smart meter? What kind of triggered this idea that all these structures need to be updated with smart meters? Are you familiar with what that rollout was?
Yeah, so it gives, I don't know everything about it, but it gives a lot of information to PG&E, a lot of information. They can actually tell what appliances based on the hertz or megahertz are being used. It actually gives them the information, and it gives them the ability to remotely shut down your power, and it a lot more control over the system. And
They send out a pulse about every 15 or 20 seconds. They send this pulse out. And what they do is, in a neighborhood where everybody's got a smart meter, is they only supposedly send it to the next house downstream, so that ultimately it comes out tagging your house, but it's like they're talking
they all
to each other.
communicate with each other.
Okay, so it's like a circuit, a network where
Yes.
these houses all talk
But
to
it's
each other.
it's wireless.
It's wireless.
So yeah, and the pulse, I've seen videos that people have done where they can actually take a measurement on the microwave
Yes.
energy that's coming out.
The electromagnetic energy that's coming out, and from what I've read, it can be extremely high, but it is so fast that they can make it sound like the way they do it. It's averaged out over a minute. It's not very much, but when they're doing it, and if you're in the vicinity, it's a really high. It can be a really high amount. So that's my understanding.
So this rollout of the smart meters happened a few years back, where in the past, PG&E or whatever your electric company would have to come and read your meter to see how many,
Right.
kilowatts of electricity you used, and now they're coming out with smart meters where these people don't have to come out to your house anymore. They can actually just tap in.
They have to come here.
Do they? Mine too.
Mine
Mine too.
Mine too.
Yeah, so let it be said, let it be known
For-
that we
yeah,
don't like smart meter.
Yeah, praise the Lord that California still has an opt-out program. I did, that was one of the first things I did when I moved in here, is get rid of the analog meter, ditch that. And,
Oh, you mean the smart meter?
yeah, the smart
Analog
meter, and
meter.
went back to
The
the
analog.
analog, yeah.
Right. And is it true that even though you opt out and you pay more money, which is ironic, you pay more money for them, but is it true that if your neighbors don't opt out, how do you know what the distance is that they can?
It's quite a distance. It's quite a distance because I had two on my property, and they were going to have them communicate with each other, and the one down by my shed down there, that's a good 70 yards, and they were, and I think they can go a long ways, maybe a half mile. I'm not sure exactly. I think it depends probably on the obstructions.
Right. And so they kind of tailor it to say, hey, we can see how much energy you're using at the refrigerator level. I mean,
they can
when you cook,
they can sell the data. That data is for sale.
yeah,
So
yeah, and so we're gonna find out a lot more.
Or they can
information.
send over the electricity police when you're drying rugs in your dryer and you have to run it for an extra cycle.
Wow.
Like
I mean,
yesterday.
right? Oh, mercy. And so the smart meters really take away a lot of our liberty, and on my show I talk about getting your freedom back.
Oh, and there's health hazards,
Okay.
heavy duty health hazards with
Yeah.
smart meters.
it's the thing is they haven't, done all the studies. Kind of like 5G.
Uh-huh.
It's they're putting stuff out before doing the necessary
They're
studies.
rolling it out
Yeah.
before they even know what's happening with us.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to diverge there, but I just wanted to lay the foundation of what is a smart meter, how does it operate, and we know now that it's run by PG&E, and every house is kind of tagged. It's kind of like having your own personal.
And PG&E has come and put them without asking, without telling, just doing it. And now, when you say you don't want it, you have to pay them extra.
Exactly.
So they never actually came up and said, "Hey, we want to put this in. Do you mind if we put this in? And if we put it in, and you decide you don't want it, we're going to charge you." They never do that. They're just putting them in without asking if you care, and then they're charging you more when you want to remove it.
Right.
So
Yeah, for me, the cost differential was worth it, just for the
Absolutely.
peace of mind. But I think for me, it was something like $13 or $16 a month more.
Right. Right.
And that's supposedly to cover the
People
cost
to come
of,
out and read
yeah,
your meter, which we used to.
which is
Yeah,
fine. I
totally
mean,
fine.
I can deal with that.
Totally fine. Okay, so let's go back to the smart meters. You had mentioned you'd seen the smart meter at the school, and it was completely.
yeah, so there's been a lot of theories that the smart meters might be part of what's causing all this devastation, or what's going on with the smart meters, and so we were kind of suspicious. We wanted to see, and then when we saw that evidence with our own eyes, that it clearly was caused from the wiring somehow, a surge of electricity or a pulse of electricity, and then it starts making me wonder about if it's heating up enough to do that, and all these anomalies, why are these houses burning from the inside out? Is there something that's happening to the wiring of the house that maybe is catching other things on fire? That's just me asking
Okay,
questions,
sure.
not, wondering.
Yeah.
So-
Not something that we feel comfortable proving.
Right.
We
you
are
just saw
here.
to
We
just
are
give
here to
information.
talk about the anomalies that
Yeah,
we did
that's
see
right.
and that we did document.
That's right.
So that bridges over into theory.
Right.
We're going to touch a little bit more on that in a minute.
Could you tell us a little bit about? Were you able to do any forensics on any of the dust, any of the ash? Did you see anything that seemed unusual?
Well, if Matt and I were prepared, if we saw a little pile of white dust that's been reported up there, we would have taken a little sample of that to have it analyzed. But generally, everything up there, we tried not to disturb anything. We didn't touch anything.
Wow.
We just used this.
Yep. Yep.
And like you said, in so many places where the anomalies were the most is where things were burned completely down to soil, down to
Right.
mineral soil.
Right.
So
Right.
it was nothing to get a lot of.
When Jamie and I went up there, we went the back way and we saw this massive PG&E staging area. I mean, literally it felt like thousands and thousands of trucks.
That's on Skyway.
On Skyway.
In between Chico and Paradise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Closer to
we should
Chico.
probably get into that, into the resource development, the anomaly of the resources.
That'd be great.
So we have a witness that we spoke to up there that had driven down Skyway for at least 2 weeks prior to the fire, and he looked off to the south of Skyway, looked off, and where it used to be a golf course, he noticed a huge amount of PG&E trucks and tents and other equipment there, like a staging area, and he was wondering what is going on. Asking his other family members, and this was for at least 2 weeks prior to the
2
fire.
weeks prior.
Okay, 2 weeks prior, PG&E setting up some massive staging area
Yes.
near the golf course.
Yes.
In Paradise.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's the same one that when we went up Skyway, we saw it, and it was massive. It was massive, and so we saw exactly what he was talking about. But that was apparently,
What do you guess on the amount of acreage that they were using there?
well, it was a golf course. So I don't know. I mean,
40, 50 acres? Is what
maybe.
That's
I mean,
kind of
it's
what I
40,
guessed.
50 football field's about an acre. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It was a big area.
Huge staging area.
Okay.
It was big. It was.
I didn't think that we had that many PG&E trucks in the whole state of California. Did you, Matt?
New
yeah.
headquarters, probably.
Oh my God! The first day we were up there, we were absolutely blown away. We saw hundreds
Hundreds of PG&E
PG&E
trucks. And what were
trucks.
they doing?
Well, they were all coming down. We didn't actually get in the first day, so
Yeah.
we got turned around. But they were all leaving work. It was 5:30 or something like
Right.
that.
They're
and
coming
were all
down the hill.
coming down
Right.
Skyway,
And we're-
it was just
We're at the
Convoy.
stop sign, to pull out onto the highway to go down the hill in
Right.
the direction they're going. And it took us somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to get out of there. It was
Because of
just
all
like,
the trucks, like
yeah,
caravan,
yeah.
caravan.
and other service trucks.
Were they identified?
Some of them you could identify, some of them I couldn't. There was outfits in there from out of state, and also logos that I didn't recognize as being a California resource.
Okay.
So other things that maybe it was just being very efficient. Don't know. I mean, we talked to a rep from OES on our first trip up there, and they said that they were set up that first day. So it seemed awfully.
Sorry about that. We're gonna just.
Am I still on?
You are now.
So OES had everything set up. They said the first day, which I don't know what they normally do, how long it takes, and where they were getting the resources from. Maybe right out of Sacramento. It seemed awfully quick to me. Don't know, John. Do you have any?
It seemed unusually quick.
Yeah, it seemed awfully quick to me. And then you compile that with that all the staging of PG&E vehicles and other vehicles 2 weeks prior. That seemed strange.
That does seem strange.
I would say they had some really smart managers managing the
Smart
smart fire,
managers, smart
because they were
wins.
able to anticipate that fire was going to happen 2 weeks ahead of time.
That is very, and then the fact that PG&E says we're going to be shutting down people's.
Yeah.
For like every day for how many days, a week or 5 days or something.
Yeah.
They said that they kept saying it over and over and over.
Right.
So
And it was a little bit reminiscent of the World Trade Center, explaining the World Trade Center, how they were just so right on top of that, how they knew exactly who the perpetrator was and how he did it from a
they
cave in
found a
Afghanistan.
passport on the ground. They
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
find
yeah.
one
Right,
on the
right.
passport. In the rubble.
That survived
In the rubble.
those massive
Yeah.
fires that happened.
It was a
Yeah.
little bit reminiscent of that because, first of all, I never heard any reports of down wires. Okay, that's me personally, and I have not heard those reports. What I heard consistently was that PG&E reported it had some kind of a problem in its lines. Okay, and that would have been on the is it Concal?
Mm-hmm.
Concal side.
Yeah.
So near where the fire burned in the wildland, up toward Paradise. Okay, so problem. And then the investigation seemed to immediately focus on that So the official fire investigation seemed to immediately focus on, it's PG&E, right?
Right.
And that is what reminded me of the World Trade Center.
Right.
Pay no attention over
Yeah.
here. We've got the answer right over here.
So
Wow.
another interesting note is legislation was just signed, I think it was in October, maybe September, allowing PG&E to pass on liability to its customers.
That's SB 901.
So I'm not sure.
I think it's SB
I
901.
think you're right. I
So-
remember that too,
Yeah,
that
no-
we were gonna eat the costs
Yeah,
of all of the damage that happened with PG&E, that they would not, they would just
yeah.
roll it
So
over
that
to
just
the.
Yeah, they
within
just
the last couple
Let
months.
the consumers pick up
Yeah.
the difference on it.
Right,
So
right.
it's-
All of it seems so fishy. And I was reading SNR September the 20th, and they had a picture of PG&E with this big transformer, literal like, you know, those cartoon transformers, like with electricity coming out of his eyes. And I hope I'm saying that right. And is PG&E trying to burn up California with their lack of being able
Sounds like a David Dees artist picture.
Yeah,
if
it
you're
was
familiar.
crazy. And I saw this article after this huge fire happened, and I was like, wow, it's September 20th, you know, here it is sitting on my table, and it's a picture of PG&E. So it's kind of feeling like, you know, it makes you go wonder what is going on. Yeah, so PG&E's up there. Did you guys see any military?
Yes, yeah, we did. First day we went up there, we saw a ton of MRAPs. What else, John?
Let's see, that particular field was next to the airport where we saw the MRAPs. And I forget what MRAP stands for, but it's basically a military explosion resistant vehicle.
Yeah,
And there was probably about 20 of them in there. And then the other thing that we were able to see in there is some sort of big human resource allocation area, because there was this great big huge tent or temporary enclosure, and the guy at the gate was telling us, yeah, that's where they eat and recreate and whatever. It's like, wow.
And where was that? Was that in Chico, or was
This
that
was
in
in
Chico.
That
Chico,
was in Chico.
Yeah.
And
near
this,
the airport.
near the airport. And was it the Office of Emergency Services? Is that
Yes,
where you
yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they had huge flatbed trailers in there with what looked to me like great big generators, portable generators.
Interesting. And did they say anything when you went in to ask questions?
They said you can't go in.
Yeah, they had everything heavily
On
protected.
lockdown.
Yeah, guarded. So yeah.
And so, and this is kind of near the airport in Chico, where the operations of emergency services were set up, and that's where you saw the tanks and the military, as well, or did you actually see it inside Paradise?
No, they were at that site.
At that site. Interesting. And did you find anything up in Paradise? Did you see any tanks or any military presence up there?
I didn't. We had a witness that we witnessed the first day that said as she was trying to leave, and I think that was the Magalia area, she saw 3 military vehicles, and she wasn't sure what they were. Then she thought that she was surprised to see them up there, also leaving in the same group of vehicles that she was trying to get out of there.
Yeah, I didn't see any either.
Okay.
So-
I just remember one at the gate. I went up there. I think we followed you two when you guys went in through Skyway to get into the main road, and we got turned away. But the night before, I had driven up the back way, and there was a big tank there with a guy, military, apparently National Guard, but
Yeah, we know they were there.
yeah, they were there. Okay, so could you guys talk a little bit more? So we've established kind of this smart meter anomaly. Do you care to kind of talk about how is that tied to fires? Can smart meters in and of themselves get triggered to start a fire? Do we know?
Well,
Yeah, there's.
that to me it was obvious based just on that proof alone, where in a protected cabinet that's unburned. It's not like the doors were open and it got burned externally, otherwise we would see evidence. But it was burned itself. So it either was a surge or a pulse that overwhelmed the meter. So was it if it had been analog, would it have started? I've never heard of an analog meter fire. I've heard of a lot of
smart meter fires.
but never heard of an analog
Not
meter.
associated with Paradise.
Right.
Right,
Just
exactly.
standalone
Yeah. So
smart meter
and
fires.
so having heard that and being kind of trying to pay attention, and then when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, there absolutely, there's something here that absolutely can start fire. Now, is that something PG&E can do by pulsing too much power through the line or a certain frequency? I don't know, but somehow it's getting through the line and it's happening. So
Something happened, and then, we have the obvious question that jumps out is, how come PG&E's telling everybody they're going to shut off the power, and then this fire starts, and in supposedly very high windy conditions, how come the power wasn't shut off?
yeah.
Interesting.
That's, I mean, to
Interesting.
me, that's a no-brainer
Right.
to ask that question.
There are a lot of things too. More witness statements. Nobody for saying this is a red flag.
They didn't
red,
get
red
warned.
flag all week long. Going to have high fire dangers. They never got a phone call. Never, and they what is that?
Nextel.
Nextel or Nexel.
Nexel.
Nexel. They members of that. They never got a phone call that there was a fire.
So, as firemen, could you explain to our listeners what is Nextel? What is a service that?
It is a service where you can call up or do it on line. You get into it, you sign up for it, and you sign up by zip code. So for me, I'm actually in two of them.
Okay.
So for Lake County by zip code, and then also I monitor where my kids live in Petaluma.
Got it.
So I'm two, and you could go up to 5 zip codes.
Got it. So you can sign up and say, hey, if there's like some kind of evacuation emergency alert system, call my phone, or is it call my cell phone?
It just automatically sends
Calls the
you
number.
like usually a text message.
Okay,
Usually.
so you have to have a cell phone
Yeah.
to get that information. And what you're saying is that we've heard from witnesses that they never got this.
Correct.
Consistently
And
from
do you
a large
usually-
number of witnesses.
Okay, got it. And do you usually, who sends those messages out? Is it the fire department? Is
It's
it
not the
police?
fire department. It's
Sheriff? I think it might be sheriff. That they
It
get
probably
routed
is.
through.
It probably is the sheriff's department. It would be my guess, and they, push a button, and everybody that is subscribed or on the list automatically gets a phone call. But I'm
Just
Gotcha.
shoots them out.
I'm speculating, but that would make sense to me because
Gotcha.
they're the ones that would know.
Gotcha.
That someone in the county dispatch or
I'm gonna stop real quick. I'm gonna change out my battery. We're gonna keep talking I'm here, if you're just tuning in, I'm here with Matt and John, retired firemen, and we're talking about the Paradise Fire. Some of the things we've been discussing have been about the anomalies
Where we're up to.
of where the fires are burning and the trees are not,
Good
right?
point.
And where the
Talk
grass
about
fires
grounding.
are burning, or
You
where
want me to
there
cover
should be
that?
grass burning, there's not, but yet these
Sure.
guardrails are
Okay.
burning. All right, so we're gonna come back here. I'm gonna keep recording here. All right, so,
Add this in there. I want to add this first.
okay.
Okay.
All right, welcome back, guys. I had to do a quick battery change out. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. We're in our second hour, and you're listening to FVRlive.com. We're going to continue on for the next probably 10 minutes or so. We're going to do a little wrap up of this hour, and then come back to the next hour. We're going to do some theories, some conclusions of what we have discovered. As you know, this is a huge story. The Paradise Fire. Supposedly, the narrative is that 52,000 people got out without any Nextel warning at all, or very limited warning, I should say, and on a 2-lane road that were flames on both sides, and we're just trying to kind of reel that in and do a little bit of investigative work. So, welcome back, John and Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for the quick battery change out. Okay, so go ahead, Matt.
So I would like to continue on another witness statement. We had a couple witnesses that we interviewed on our last trip up, and they both stated that they had an inability ever since the fire, inability to concentrate or focus. And you could say that that would make sense because they've been through a post-traumatic stress situation, but I didn't really get that from, they were cool, calm, and collect, and they said so it didn't really strike me as that was what was causing it. It seemed like there was something more.
I'm in agreement with that too.
So they said they had an absolute inability to really focus or concentrate. So that maybe there was something going on that was causing that. So
And
I
this
just
was prior to the fire?
no,
or
no, no.
after?
This was just our last trip up there. They said
Okay.
ever since the fire,
Gotcha.
they've noticed that they can't think clearly, and and it seemed to me, since they were both seemed very cool, calm, and collected, that it seemed like you couldn't explain it away just from post-traumatic stress. It seemed like it was more than that. Like it was truly, there was something above and beyond that, because they seemed very, very both their places were saved. They
Wow.
weren't, and they both seemed like in every other way they were dealing with everything just fine. It's just they could not focus or concentrate. So it seemed like more than just the post-traumatic stress from the fire. So whether there's something to that or not, it's just another piece of information.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, did you want to talk about
Grounding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we're going to go into another area.
Okay, so we did a lot of discussion about the various steel structures and steel buildings that we looked at and surveyed and photographed. The mobile homes, when they bring those in, all of the mobile homes were set on masonry pier blocks.
Okay.
So the only way for that building to be grounded would be through, a pretty good sized piece of copper wire from the panel down into a grounding rod.
Okay.
And then we also talked about the difference. This shed got all burned up, this one didn't. And what really got my attention was the freestanding carport that I talked about.
Yes.
I couldn't explain why that thing was in such good shape after what it just went through. And I went, the posts for it are through the concrete slab down into the ground.
So they're grounded.
They're grounded.
Gotcha.
So as I became aware of that, Matt and I talked about it briefly, and then we both just started watching for it. And understanding that, are you familiar with the term Faraday cage?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So a car is a really good Faraday cage, except
The tires.
it's not
Grounded.
grounded. So
Yes.
if you ground your car, like when I used to park my truck in Rona Park, I used to keep it on a grounding wire where I could just unlatch it for the truck if I was using the truck.
Okay.
But
And what would be the point of grounding your car?
All the energy that goes in, if it got hit,
Like
They would
lightning
have
or
some
something?
yeah,
place to
exactly.
go.
It'll release that energy.
Okay.
And so you think about a car,
Mhm.
because the energy wants to go to ground.
Right.
Everything wants to go to ground.
Right.
And where's it going to go with the car? It's going to go through the tires to
Which
get to
are
ground.
rubber.
Which are rubber.
so it's insulated.
So, and what's that going to do to the tires?
Yeah.
It's going to heat them up
Right.
as it's trying to get to ground.
Right.
So that was started.
And that would explain the distortion of the steel frames in the mobile home park, the frames they're built on.
Interesting.
If there was some sort of energy flowing through the steel and the metal pieces, like the fence posts that Matt talked about with the spikes and the wires,
That was catching everything else in the cars, that was catching all the combustibles in
all the
the cars.
combustible contents on fire.
That's what it appeared to us, is all the metal, if all the metal had an energy going through it that was heating up anything that was attached to it, that everything we saw would kind of goes along with that.
Wow.
It's a form, think of it this way, resistance heating.
Yes.
Resistance heating is where you have an element, like in your toaster, you have the elements in there, and when you put your toast down, they get red hot, and they start toasting it. So it appears that whatever happened caused things that were ungrounded to hold the heat energy in, and which eventually just get hotter and hotter and hotter. That's what we're
Wow.
suspicious of. That's what we're
Wow.
thinking about, and that evidence was in all the vehicles we talked about that were torched. The 2 box trailers with no fuel around them, the metal outbuildings, the carport, the mobile homes. The school had a lot of metal plumbing and all kinds of stuff in it, and it's a plausible explanation to be led to.
Wow. Okay, so let me just try to piece this back together. You're saying that based on some observations that these cars that were not good grounding to begin with because they had rubber tires, these mobile home parks that didn't have good grounding because of just the copper wire that just goes down into the ground when they piece
When they put the panel in.
them together.
Yeah.
As opposed to these carports that are poles going through the concrete into the ground are standing while the cars are not, and these mobile home parks are not. What about these houses? These houses that kind of collapse inside of themselves.
So I'm in agreement that I think that the grounding there might be a grounding component,
Yes.
but, and this kind of gets us to some more conclusions. So I
Sure,
think
sure,
that
sure.
there's a
We
lot
can
of
come
evidence
back
to what
there.
he's saying, and
Yeah.
I love what he's saying about the resistant heating, and I think
Yes.
that's the resistant heating is I agree. Everything to me kind of agrees with that.
Yeah.
You see the fence posts that are burned where the wire went through.
Right, right.
Or all the, and that explained the cars, the metal. So it's the metal, anything that was touching the metal, it just seemed like just
Wow.
burned really,
Right.
and these houses burned from the inside out is what it looked like. The
Right.
most destruction and devastation
Right.
was on the inside. And so I'll get to it right now. It reminds me of, the metal car down to nothing left, just a shell, and the plastic garbage can just fine. Reminds me if you had a big microwave and you could put a plastic toy or, in there, and you could put some tin foil, which one's gonna do better?
Right, and they tell us always to
Or-
avoid metal
Or a piece
in
of
the
wood,
microwaves.
a piece of wood and a piece of metal, well, wood burns, metal doesn't, right? Well, in a microwave, what's gonna burn?
Wow. If you're just tuning in, we just, we are going down the rabbit hole. We are getting deep, deep, deep layers. You're listening to FERlive.com, The Ferret. This is Shelley Lewis coming at you from Down the Rabbit Hole with my 2 guests, John Lord and Matt. And we're examining a lot of the evidence that they discovered while up at the Paradise Fires. Our hour is just about up, and we're going to come back next hour and talk more about conclusions, theories, and I really want to get into more about this microwave technology. And if you, personally, my own opinion is this was an event that was, and I'm going on the record saying it, was planned, because it just seems like everything is pointing to that. And we've thrown out terms such as smart meters and grounding and some kind of microwave event. But I want to talk too about directed energy weapons, and if that might be some kind of moving part in this huge chaotic mess. We try to say, oh, it's just one thing, it's this thing, but really I think it's this concert of things that have happened, and nothing at this point is off the table. So definitely come back next hour, guys. You're listening to FERlive.com, The Ferret. I'm Shelley Lewis with Down the Rabbit Hole. See you next hour.